this guy called Sheikh Uthman, who is Pakistani Pashtun from California, who was recently banned from entering the UK. What do you guys know about that?
I mean, on all things Pakistani and Pashtun, I will defer to my friend Sergio.
Yeah, well, of course, there is a lot of things about him on social media and on internet, and of course, I don't personally know him, but what we know from his preaching, I mean, like he's good Muslim preacher. He's typical Dawa guy who just loves to, point fingers at others and start questioning without any, serious discussion. I would say is just to prove others wrong. That's how his mentality works, and I have seen him his couple of videos, and at the same time, I acknowledge his work. He is well versed in Quran and Hadith, right? So that is it goes to his credit. And the reason he's banned is pretty interesting, right? You want to go over what's the reason of his ban?
So, and parental warning if you have kids with you. But basically, my understanding is there's a video circulating of him justifying sleeping with a captive slave woman. Right? Is that
Yeah.
was that the one?
Yes. So it is completely permissible in Islam.
So that's interesting, right? Because you have, I believe this is Surah An-Nisa, where it says,
Yes.
permissible for you are your wives and those who your right.
Malakat aymanukum, your right hand's possession, that is to your concubines. That is what is referring to. And of course, the concept of concubines died somewhere along, I don't know when, in Islamic jurisprudence, but at the same time, there are countless hadith and references from Islamic history and sources that solidify that effect that you can have sex with your concubine without going into marriage, yours, because they are your possession. So what he is coming from sources, right, which is insane. I know the most modern scholars in the United States, scholars in UK generally, they refute this claim that no, it is not allowed now. It was allowed back then, but the context has changed, so the overall message has been, nullified. But I think what he's quoting is truly from the scripture and from the sources, I would say.
So let's talk about this because I want people to understand that this is from the sources, but what I don't want people to do is to paint all modern Muslims and think, oh yeah, these are people who regularly practice sex slavery, right?
Yeah, no, sex slavery is long gone. There is no. I grew up in a Muslim world. I lived 28 years of my life in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, right? And I have not seen any sex slaves practice anywhere, or never heard of, let alone seeing. Never heard of sex slave practice in the world that I live in. Rumors, theories exist, right? I'm talking about solid proof, video evidence. I mean, now ChatGPT and everything else comes in.
Right.
We don't have solid proofs, but talk about all those things. I don't think that is practice. But again, going back to that point, if someone says that what he's saying is not right, I would say no, he's saying everything right according to the scriptures.
Right. I mean, I would say in mainstream Islam it doesn't happen, but it did happen in like ISIS,
Yeah.
like those kinds of areas. So where there's extremist Islamist foothold, those things happen, but it's not indicative. Like I grew up around Turks. There was not even not having like sex slaves. It was like no multiple wives.
Yeah.
So
Same in Pakistan.
it was a lot like that. So when you hear about these things, they're in the modern sense, it's essentially like associated with war crimes, right? Like what happened, um, ISIS K, ISIS in Iraq, some of the things that happened then.
Boko Haram,
Boko Haram,
Yeah.
Al
yeah, like
Shabaab.
yeah, different places where it's certainly not the norm in the Muslim world. Like what's probably even more normal, but still happens less is the idea of like multiple wives. Um, yeah, so that happens,
And
and I mean again, like not in Turkey. I'm not sure about Pakistan.
No, not
Okay,
like multiple wives. It's not a common thing.
Yeah.
It's more common in Arabs, and Arabs mean Khalijis most likely.
Right.
But at the same time, I would say that the idea, if we see it with the broader context, and if we want to give Islam some grace, we would say that okay, there were some rules that need to be changed with the time. For example, I give you example of taking a picture. Taking a picture in Islam is haram.
Right.
It's forbidden.
Right.
You can't make a picture of a human being. But now the need of the time demands, for example, your ID cards need to be having a picture of you.
Right.
So then there is ijma al-ummah, right? The consensus of ummah. Consensus of ummah means your leaders, your ulama agree on certain thing, right? So ulamas agreed on certain thing, and one was that there should not be more of that concubine concept. It is not required because the Islamic State and whoever like Boko Haram, like ISIS, like ISIS-K or whoever is very fundamentalist and want to just import and implement that same system that was implemented at the time of Muhammad, right? So that is what the problem is.
So one thing I would kind of look at this situation with this particular imam is this seems like it deviates from that. Like it takes somebody who's a little bit more mainstream and is re-injecting the idea back into the let's just say the court of public opinion. You know, the fact that we saw a video of it, right, circulating around on the internet, and this is not a nobody. This is not someone who is, you know, like a supporter of ISIS-K or anything like that, right? Like he's not that guy. He's not. He doesn't come off as being extremely radical, but he's saying something that is associated with radicalism. So that to me is like where he kind of started getting into trouble with the government. But yeah, what do you think?
So what I think about this is that I can understand entirely why people in England don't want people who believe and teach these things coming to England. But here's the thing. That kind of mindset is already in England to a large scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I mean, basically, it's a fundamentalist Salafi mindset, right?
No,
No, it's not. You don't think it's a Salafi approach?
No, it is not. It is. I think again, going back to scriptures, it exists in scripture.
Right.
Let me give an example like this. The concept of concubine is in Old Testament too, right? How Christians see it. Something that was in the past was given for a specific time period. It's not practiced no more. It's not allowed. Whatever is talked about negatively.
Right.
And it was a certain situation and consequences. So in that regard, I think Islam or Muslims in general, I'm not saying every single Muslim, I'm saying most of the Muslims. Most of the Muslims, educated Muslims have seen or studied or been out there. They do not believe in having sex slaves no more.
Okay, so how do you reconcile that with like the they're attributing it to Muslims and like what happened in the UK with all of the girls who were like, kind of essentially like, does that fit the same thing?
Okay, here's what I would say. Under the classical Islamic definition of what that meant, not really.
Right.
So I think Muslims have generally believed in obeying the law of whatever land they're living in general. Now they may want some.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not trying to say that that's indicative of all Muslims or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, where does the idea come from?
Okay, so the idea,
or the justification at least.
So the justification definitely comes from that. But in the same way that, so in Bahrain, for example, this is one of the ways that prostitution was justified. So the way prostitution used to be practiced in Bahrain is you'd basically buy a woman from an owner, sleep with her, and then return her to the owner. Because if you own the woman, that is halal under Islamic law, right?
But
now,
Quran explicitly say, do not sell your slave girls into prostitution.
Well, again, this is it. This is it, right? So I'm not saying
There's contradictions.
these are not people who are their main goal is not how do we follow Allah from our heart, right? How do we follow the Quran, the Sunnah from the heart? They want to make money from prostitution and are figuring out how to kind of finagle the rules in order to get what they want, right?
Right.
Do I drop the bomb here and say I'm looking at you, Andrew Tate? No, kidding. Maybe a little kidding. Maybe not.
So like you have to understand the people. If you have a Muslim guy that's seeing prostitutes and using this concept as a justification for that, that is not generally somebody who's striving to like really seek a faithful Islam, right? This is probably not a guy who's praying 5 times a day in the mosque, although it might be.
Yeah.
Right? It's different things, right? There are things in the sources which I would find troubling, which the Bible would be against. But you have to be able to differentiate between like what the bad idea is in the first place and how people apply that bad idea.
Yes. Agree. Again, you go back to scriptures, you'll find things that you can use for your own personal gains and benefits and do certain things. But again, wrapping this up from my side, my point of view, and also I would like to add England, what you call grooming gang incident. I think it is again the sin nature.
Yeah.
More than just
Sure.
just that Islam or Islamic.
I mean, I think you can do that in any religion, right? You can take any religion and twist it around
Yeah.
of how you want it to be, as so that it benefits you and whatever your passions and pleasures are.
Right.
Right. It's not like it's never been done in Christianity before or anything.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, David Koresh. Wait, I can't look at you. You're dead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these people are always going to be here. Now, again, I think there are problems with the Quranic view of this. And I think there are problems, those problems are only amplified once you get to the Sitta Hadith.
Yeah.
And, and if you're in, there's plenty of problems like this in Shia sources as well, just in case where,
Yeah, it's not just Sunni.
It's not just the Sunni problem, right? But you have to be able to differentiate that problem from the problem of people using this and like running with it. Like it's not being used the way it was intended. Even if I don't like the way it's intended, you got to be able to make a differentiation between them. So what I think here, I think England is well within its rights to ban people from coming and preaching who talk about those things. But I think people in England need to have a serious thinking and discussion about, well, how do you deal with all the people who are currently living in your society who believe this? And it's not a simple solution. You can't just deport everyone because a lot of them are citizens. You can't stamping down with like force and shutting people down for what they're saying isn't going to work. You have to get closer. You have to be able to have these conversations. You have to educate people. You have to be able to sit face to face and be able to talk in these things in detail, not be shocked by them, but also be able to sort of argue your case and remember what you stand for. England needs to return to its roots, and by its roots, what I mean is biblical Christianity. And from that position, Christians especially need to be able to walk across the aisle, sit down with people, have friendly, honest conversations about things that might shock you, but ultimately that's the way society is going to get better unless you have some crazy revolution, which no one wants.
Right? Yeah, in this regard, I have a question. If we are not running out of time, we are already over for this section, but still, I'm going to ask a little small question. When we think of returning back to roots of England, as you mentioned, Christianity, for so many Muslim spectators, that is a right, radical, far-right Christian groups. So it is just saying that you are, again, those radical right groups have agendas that you and I do not support, neither him or not a rational person, right? So how you say, oh, it is just replacing one evil with the another evil? What difference does it make?
Yeah, so there's certain like flavors of what would appear to be Christianity, which would probably be worse than Islam in England. And that's our version of the Muslim guy using Surah An-Nisa to justify seeing a prostitute.
Right.
The difference is with biblical Christianity is that you have a singular source in the Bible, which everyone can be held to that account, right? Whereas, and it's not to say there's no interpretive work to be done, but there's generally a simpler standard there, and it's one that we can all hold each other to as well. But again, this isn't about imposing something top down through law. This is about love, about heart transformation,
Your hearts and minds.
and not about coercion.
Right.
So obviously the government needs to have some sorts of laws and standards which are going to reflect the worldview of the people there. But Christianity is not going to be advanced by arresting Muslims.
No.
Christianity is going to be advanced by making friends with Muslims and being honest.